Ladies and gentlemen. Let me tell you something, brother.
It's Talk Wrestling Live with Felix The Cat Katlovski
and Gemini Joe.
It doesn't matter what your name is.
We heard rumbling. No. We heard rumors. Homicide. Conan. 5150 at LAX.
Listen live on Mondays at 4 p.m. on NorthCoastUnderground.com.
And follow us on Twitter at TWL 24/7.
I'm in no mood for your wisecrack. Let's get it on.
Hey wrestling fans, we are back on Talk Wrestling Live on the air on NorthCoastUnderground.com, where the underground starts with you. And this is Felix the Cat Katlovski telling you about Fear After Dark. We're about to start that. We're going to be talking about Impact Wrestling, so let's get it kicking with Fear After Dark.
Are you scared? It's time for Fear After Dark.
I thought this was fun and games.
Here's a funny thing.
Pensalo! Miedo!
Fear was meant for the art of survival. I am the new beginning.
We are for Ohio, because we are Ohio versus everything.
I'm better than every single one in that locker room. Tessa Blanchard is undeniable.
I'm not a man. I'm a machine.
Hey everybody, and this is Fear After Dark, and we are recapping everything that happened from last week's episode of Impact Wrestling on March 15th. In our first match, we had OVE with Sami Callihan, and they were taking on Rich Swann, Willie Mack, and Tommy Dreamer. You had Callihan, he's pretty much done recruiting Rich Swann into OVE, and now he wants to punish him. And at one point you had Tommy Dreamer on his back, and he was just flopping like a turtle. I mean, he couldn't get up. And Swann and Willie Mack helped him up, and that's when Dreamer called for everyone to go for a dive. He was kind of like a coach right there. So first you had Willie Mack, and he went flying to the outside of the ring. He was flying onto OVE, and then Rich Swann did pretty much the same thing. Then it was followed off by Tommy Dreamer. So Callihan, he spit a loogie at Tommy Dreamer's face, which is pretty disgusting. And there was a moment when Tommy Dreamer was in the corner, and Dreamer would get hurt each time the Chris brothers attacked him. But when it was time for Callihan to make the attack, Dreamer would always make the reversal. So towards the end of the match, we saw Rich Swann and Willie Mack. They synchronized frog splashes on the Chris brothers, and then Tommy Dreamer hit a frog splash as well, and it looked like Dreamer, Swann, and Mack had the upper hand. But then just as Callihan was on his knees, he grabbed Tommy Dreamer in the jewels. Dreamer was in so much pain, and that's when Sami Callihan closed the match out with a pile driver on Tommy Dreamer and a 3-count victory for OVE and Sami Callihan. Then we learned that after a winner is crowned between Tessa Blanchard and Jordynne Grace, that the winner of that match would not only be the #1 contender of Taya Valkyrie's Impact Wrestling Knockouts Championship, but at an upcoming Impact Wrestling show called Against All Odds. In the past, Against All Odds, it was a TNA pay-per-view name. So we'll see how they use this show, because we haven't seen it in a while. So both Brian Cage and Johnny Impact, they were cleared to wrestle. And if you tuned in before, Brian Cage, he lost a lot of blood in his tag team match with Johnny Impact against Moose and Killer Kross. And Johnny Impact messed up one of his parkour moves, and it looked like he had a neck injury. So a few weeks ago, you had Moose. He called Johnny Impact Johnny Neck Brace, and Johnny Impact, he was backstage still wearing a neck brace while Brian Cage met up with him. And Brian Cage asked Johnny if he was ready for tonight, because they would finally be having their one-on-one match for the Impact World title. So Johnny told Brian Cage to just make sure if Brian Cage was ready, and they went their separate ways. Then you had the Rascals. They were in their circle, and they were arguing about how they lost to the Lucha Bros. And they all came to the same conclusion. It was because they didn't wear their masks. Now, I remember the Rascals, they had that Kikataro mask back then just in case. And then Moose, he joined the Rascals, and out of nowhere, Moose reminded Trey that he made fun of him for wearing a pink jacket. And while Moose was unsuccessfully flirting with Melissa Santos, the Impact Wrestling backstage interviewer, things went from just laughs to hostility when Moose asked who made the first comment about Moose being turned down by Melissa. And Moose started choking out Trey and punching him in the face repeatedly. And then he started punching Zach Wentz and Desmond Xavier in the face. So then you had Glenn Gilberti, and he came to the ring to put on exhibition. Now, Gilberti, he was looking for Scarlett Bordeaux, but she wasn't anywhere near. And he said that Scarlett thought this was a circus, so Gilberti, he was calling for a clown. And out came named Kikutaro. So Glenn Gilberti, he had that match with Kikutaro, and Gilberti had control for most of the match, but Kikutaro did get in a nice Shining Wizard. And later Kikutaro went for an ill-advised moonsault, and he missed. Now this allowed Disco Inferno Glenn Gilberti to get back up, and he hit a stunner on Kikutaro and a pin for the win. And then we had Taya Valkyrie. She was backstage, and she was joined by that same investigative reporter, and he was asking her about what was on her mind, and he wanted to talk to her about Against All Odds and which female combatant would be taking on Taya. Now, instead, what was on Taya's mind was her husband, Johnny Impact's World Championship match. It was on the line, like I mentioned, in that main event against Brian Cage for later in the evening. And she's still worried about Johnny's neck because he did get hurt, and she doesn't know if he'll need neck fusion surgery or what, but he still has to defend his title against the Machine Brian Cage later in the show. Then we had Reno Scum, that returning tag team from Las Vegas, and they made it back to Impact Wrestling, but, they had that match with Fallah Bahh and KM before, and Fallah Bahh and KM, they were able to get the win, and then you had Reno Scum, they were kind of like sore losers over here, and they attacked them after their match. So I mentioned Lester the Legend and Adam Thornton. Like I said, they didn't have a great return match after being away from Impact Wrestling for about 2 years, but they did get that beatdown on KM and Fallah Bahh, like sore losers I mentioned, and now both teams meet again. And you could tell there was beef between both teams even before the bell rang. I mean, Reno Scum, they threw Fallah Bahh running into the steel steps, and Lester the Legend was overpowering KM, and Adam Thornsnow helped with the double team on KM, and Bahh was still down on the outside, and you had KM, he was on his own in the corner. So KM fought off Reno Scum with an enziguri. He reversed the move by Reno Scum, which allowed him to get Bahh the tag in the ring, and because he was out of energy, I mean, that's why he needed the tag, and Bahh was fresh. So despite getting thrown into those steel steps at the beginning, Fallah Bahh, he was the fresh man, so why wouldn't you tag him? So Fallah Bahh, he cleared the ring of Reno Scum, and at one point, he had Lester the Legend, he ran into that turnbuckle, and Fallah Bahh hit what I thought was a belly-to-belly suplex on Adam Thornsnow, then he got the 3 count to get the win. So your winners, Fallah Bahh and KM. Now, this is the second time that Fallah Bahh and KM defeated Reno Scum. I mean, as I mentioned, just as Fallah Bahh won the match, you could really tell that Bahh was in so much pain in his knee, and probably because he was thrown into the steel steps at the beginning of the match. But you could tell, and you could see that there was a lot of fight in him, and KM, he celebrated with Fallah Bahh, and this time Reno Scum didn't attack them. So maybe Reno Scum, they're finally learning their place in Impact Wrestling. They understand that Fallah Bahh and KM didn't get a fluke victory, and it happened again. So maybe Reno Scum needs to think about some new game plan, some new strategy on how to win their matches. I mean, you've been away from Impact Wrestling for 2 years, you got to make some kind of impression. You got to impress people, and if they just keep on losing, they're not impressing anybody. So the Lucha Bros, they were backstage, and they were excited to be with Impact Wrestling in Las Vegas. But then Konnan showed up, and the last message Konnan had for the Lucha Bros was to pick a date for their rematch against LAX for the Impact Tag Team Championships. But last time they spoke, the Lucha Bros were in no rush to give LAX a rematch. They said it was too soon. So Konnan wanted to know the date, but the Lucha Bros' answer wasn't what he was looking for. You had Pentagon, he did his usual Zero Fear catchphrase, and that hand gesture, but he did it right in Konnan's face. I mean, you got to keep your distance, and that's not what Pentagon was doing. He was just doing that hand gesture in Konnan's face disrespectfully. So Konnan wasn't happy, and he said that the Lucha Bros would pay. Then we saw LAX backstage. You had Santana. He asked Ortiz if he was sleeping, but he wasn't sleeping. He was actually thinking about his rematch that LAX wanted against the Lucha Bros. And Konnan showed up again backstage, this time with LAX, and he let them know that the Lucha Bros disrespected Konnan. Both LAX and the Lucha Bros, they're family here, and they're like sons to Konnan. And Konnan, he was getting LAX all hyped up, kind of like giving a pep rally, one of those speeches, and he was just telling the troops to get their armaments and the tables because they still want a street fight with the Lucha Bros. Like I said, it was like a pep rally. LAX was fired up, but then they learned from Konnan that they didn't get the rematch just yet. It's like, yeah, you're gonna get your rematch, and then you hype everybody up, get everybody fired up, and then they find out that the rematch isn't official just yet. So then it was time for Tessa Blanchard versus Jordan Grace for that #1 contender spot for Taya Valkyrie's Knockouts Championship for Against All Odds. And I like how the Knockouts, they all have their own look. They aren't that generic Barbie doll pre-cut standard look. You got Tessa Blanchard, she's athletic and she's fit. And then you got Jordan Grace, and she's just a powerhouse. She's like a bodybuilder type. Now, neither woman was about to back down. I mean, Jordan Grace, she delivered a monstrous Falcon Arrow suplex on Tessa Blanchard, but it just wasn't enough to keep Tessa down. And Tessa was right back up. So Jordan Jordan sent her into one of the turnbuckles, and then after another turnbuckle, Jordan had Tessa right where she wanted her, but Tessa grabbed the referee and used him for the cover, so Jordynne Grace couldn't strike her, and that's when Tessa delivered a thunderous blow to the head of Jordynne Grace. And Tessa just kept attacking Jordynne Grace, and even went for that code breaker as Jordan was stuck on the turnbuckle. And then you had Tessa, she just kept nailing her fists at Jordynne Grace. And that's when Jordynne Grace, she managed to buy some time as she put Tessa into a spine buster. And Jordan took the momentum away from Tessa Blanchard, but Tessa came right back, brawling away at Jordynne Grace. And I thought it was all over when Tessa landed on her neck after Jordan put her in a Michinoku driver. And Jordynne Grace was eyeing her prey as Tessa was down. But when Jordan got her back up, she was going to close it out with a muscle buster. And somehow Tessa managed to roll out of it, and Tessa countered with her buzzsaw DDT. Now Tessa, she was shrieking like a banshee as she wanted to finish Jordynne Grace already. But just as she had Jordynne Grace where she wanted her, Tessa got distracted. And first she argued with the referee, and then she was going for the turnbuckle, and she wanted to get into the head of the fans. And Tessa, she really should have stayed focused on her match against Jordynne Grace, because Jordan threw Tessa off the turnbuckle. And there was a little bit of a scuffle, and that's when Jordynne Grace used her Grace driver to close the match out and get the victory after a successful pin on Tessa Blanchard. So now we know that Taya Valkyrie will defend her Impact Knockouts Championship against Jordynne Grace at Against All Odds. Now we don't know when the date of Against All Odds will be, but Impact Wrestling will make an announcement in the future. So Tessa, she was holding her head in pain after the match, and that was after being dropped on her head by Jordynne Grace, so I can't really blame her for holding her head like that. And the ref, he tried to help Tessa Blanchard, but she just shoved him away. And Tessa was throwing a fit because she lost her match. She started getting close to the guardrail to get in the fans' faces, and then she went after the bell holder, or timekeeper, whatever you want to call him, and she choked him out. She sent him into the ring, and she continued choking him out. And just as it looked like Tessa had cooled down, she attacked the bellkeeper once more and knocked him down to the ring canvas. And she just continued her attack. But then Gail Kim showed up, and Tessa blames Gail Kim for screwing her as a special guest referee at Homecoming when Taya beat Tessa to become the Knockouts champion. And Gail Kim, she fought Tessa off with a Lou Thez press, but that's when Tessa hightailed it as she left the ring and continued getting the fans riled up. So we'll be back, and we'll be talking more about Impact Wrestling and the conclusion of the show right after this.
Man, this sucks. I can't go to the baseball game because I have to pack. We're moving next week and I have to get enough large boxes.
Did someone say oxes?
No, I said boxes. Ox's boxes are strong like an ox and durable for moving trips.
They're also biodegradable, which is just great for the environment. Download the Ox's Boxes app on your phone today, and your first box is free. And now we're offering same-day deliveries if you order before 4 p.m. on any given business day. Like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter.
Welcome back to Talk Wrestling Live.
Follow us on Twitter at TWL 24/7.
I'm not finished with you!
And now, let's get back to the show. Hey everybody, and we're back with the Fear After Dark report, and we were just talking about Tessa Blanchard, her match with Jordynne Grace for that #1 contender spot for the Knockouts title. That's Taya Valkyrie's title right now, and Tessa Blanchard, she just did not get the job done. She lost the match because she didn't stay focused, and that allowed Jordynne Grace to get the win, and that's why Jordynne Grace is going to be at Against All Odds seeing Taya Valkyrie for that title match. And Tessa Blanchard, she was just a sore loser right there. I mean, she just took out her aggression on the timekeeper, whatever you want to call him, and that sent Gail Kim out there. Everybody knows that Gail Kim and Tessa Blanchard have some beef with each other ever since Homecoming, so Tessa Blanchard isn't happy. Gail Kim, she wants to get her hands on Tessa Blanchard as well. And when we came back to the show, you had Tessa Blanchard. She was being seen by a doctor, and Scott D'Amore, one of the executive vice presidents of Impact Wrestling, he walked in and he asked the doctor if Tessa was okay. But Tessa yelled at Scott, questioning why he was addressing the doctor when she said that she wasn't okay because Gail Kim put her hands on Tessa Blanchard and knocked her out. So Tessa questioned what kind of company Scott was running, and Tessa called herself the biggest star in Impact Wrestling, and this is how she's being treated. So Tessa, she said that she's done, and Scott tried to handle the situation to cool it down, but then Gail Kim trying to get Tessa and Scott was right in the middle of it, so he tried to separate Tessa and Gail Kim, and Gail called Tessa out of control, but Scott D'Amore called Gail Kim out of control. And Tessa is a competitor, but Gail Kim isn't anymore. So Scott lectured Gail, telling her that she should know how to behave because she crossed the line. Now Scott told Gail to cool off and that she was getting suspended for a week. And Tessa, she was just laughing at Gail Kim as Scott continued lecturing Gail on how to act like an office worker at Impact. And then he told Tessa to let the doctor check her out, as Scott D'Amore restored order to Impact Wrestling. So we saw clips of how Rosemary would constantly save Allie, and Rosemary warned Allie not to let the darkness consume her, and Allie just kept laughing, but Rosemary found nothing funny about this. And Rosemary wants her friend back, but something about Allie isn't right, as she's still consumed by the darkness. So then you had OVE and Sami Callihan. They were on the OVE cam, and Callihan had a message for Rich Swann, and Callihan called Rich Swann out because even Swann said that Callihan was family, even calling his relationship with Callihan like that of brothers. So Callihan gave Swann an opportunity of a lifetime, and Callihan said that they were going to make money together with merchandising, breaking records on YouTube, and Callihan said that Swann pledged himself for Ohio, but Swann threw it all away and messed up the plan, and now they're going to have to do it the hard way. So Callihan said he was going to take everything Swann owns from him, and next week, which will be this week, Callihan wants to take the X Division Championship from Rich Swann and bring it back home to Ohio, because OVE is for Ohio, by Ohio, and they're taking over everything. So Eli Drake and Eddie Edwards, they took on the Desi Hit Squad, and you had Gama Singh, he introduced his Desi Hit Squad to the ring, and Eli, as well as Eddie Edwards, they came to the ring by themselves, but Eddie Edwards, he brought his kendo stick Kenny with him to the ring, and this time Eli Drake, he didn't seem to have a problem with that. And for most of the match, Eddie Edwards, he was being destroyed by the Desi Hit Squad. So the Desi Hit Squad once again doing what they do best, and that's cutting the ring in half and making it harder for Eddie Edwards to tag in his tag team partner Eli Drake. Now eventually Eli helped get the momentum back, taking on both Rohit Raju and Raj while Eddie was down. And you had Gama Singh, he tried to distract Eli Drake, so Eli went to attack him, but Gama just ducked, and Eddie was still the legal man, and Eli Drake tossed Eddie the kendo stick, and Eddie whacked Rohit with it, and threw the kendo stick outside of the ring to Eli when the ref was busy dealing with Gama Singh on the ring apron. And Eddie quickly got the 3 count as the referee turned around. After the match, you had Eli Drake, he tossed Kenny the kendo stick back to Eddie when he called for it, and Eli just taunted Eddie, showing him how they outsmarted the Desi Hit Squad and how this duo should set their sights on the Impact Tag Team Championships. So in our main event match, that's for the Impact World Championship on the line, you had Brian Cage taking on the champion, Johnny Impact. And Johnny Impact, his music was playing, but he didn't come out. And then we saw Killer Kross. He was carrying a laid out Johnny Impact over his shoulders, and Kross must have attacked Johnny Impact backstage. Now Killer Kross, he was also carrying a cinder block to the ring, and one thing led to another, and Killer Kross also made a stop under the ring to grab a steel chair. So I'm sure you can take a guess what he was about to do right there. So Johnny Impact was just laying out cold in the ring, still wearing that neck brace, and Killer Kross got closer to that cinder block, and that's when Impact Wrestling security officials, they rushed to the ring, but they weren't any match for Killer Kross, with such a huge size that he is. Now, Killer Kross, he started attacking the officials from security, and one by one he took them out, and he even stripped one of the officials of their shirt and strangled them out cold. And Killer Kross, he really must have had some bad intentions on his mind when he rolled his eyes in the back of his head for a moment, kind of like the Undertaker, and with nobody in his way, Killer Kross went back to that cinder block, and Kross was teasing that he was going to be hitting Johnny Impact's head against a cinder block with a steel chair. But Brian Cage finally showed up, and Taya Valkyrie joined him. That's Johnny Impact's wife right there. So Taya ran to the ring, first to make the save, covering her husband Johnny to keep him out of harm's way, and Killer Kross, he just kept on coming closer like a bear, and he was still armed with that steel chair. I think think Taya Valkyrie had more guts than brains because she tried to attack Killer Kross, and Brian Cage was concerned. So he finally made it to the ring, and Cage disarmed Killer Kross away from the steel chair, and he super kicked him. So Brian Cage used that chair to take Killer Kross down to size. And with Killer Kross on the outside of the ring, it looked like Brian Cage once again saved Taya and Johnny Impact, but then Taya stabbed Brian Cage in the back. What was she thinking when she low-blowed Brian Cage from behind in the jewels? So Johnny Impact resiliently kicked back up, making his way back to his feet, and Johnny ripped his neck brace off, so I guess nothing was ever really wrong with him, and it was all an act to trick Brian Cage. Johnny Impact was just faking his injury the whole time. He never had a neck injury. He just wanted Brian Cage to think he had a neck injury. So Taya was in the corner laughing at Brian Cage, and Johnny Impact, he hit his finisher on Brian Cage, and he continued striking Cage, who was already on the ring canvas. Now Johnny laid that cinder block against Brian Cage's skull, and he began hitting a steel chair over that cinder block against the skull. And Johnny and Taya, they just stood tall over Brian Cage, and even Killer Kross started laughing. Were they all in on this the whole time? I mean, Moose and Killer Kross just acting as Johnny Impact's henchmen, taking out and weakening whoever he gives title shots to? So was this more of Johnny Impact rewarding those who do him personal favors? So that's how Impact Wrestling went off the air for March 15th, and I'm pretty sure Brian Cage was not happy with how that went, and I'm sure he wants to get back at Johnny Impact and show him that that wasn't right. When we come back, we'll be talking about Lights Out and what's to come in Impact Wrestling.
Ride the winds, flying far and soaring like a hawk.
Run a marathon with the endurance of a tiger.
Swim across the ocean like a dolphin.
Beast Energy X. Do you have it in you?
Buy Beast Energy X at all Waffle Max locations and unleash the beast in you.
Join the Beast Energy X fan club and get free perks. Sign up by following us on Twitter at Beast Energy X.
Welcome back to Talk Wrestling Live.
Follow us on Twitter at TWL 24/7.
I'm not finished with you!
And now, let's get back to the show. Hey wrestling fans, this is Felix The Cat Katlovski, and you're listening to Talk Wrestling Live. We just talked about Fear After Dark, the recap for Impact Wrestling. We're about to get it started with the Lights Out report, where we'll be talking about everything coming soon to Impact Wrestling.
Shut up, 5. A 10 is talking.
I'm surprised you're containing yourself. It's like looking at a work of art, John. Scarlett Bordeaux has arrived on Impact Wrestling. Oh my God.
Hey, tell them to cover up. I will not be hot shamed.
Talk about making an impact.
Make wrestling sexy again.
Scarlett Bordeaux has arrived. And now she's leaving, and it's, oh Lord.
Turn the lights down low, cause it's time for Impact Lights Out.
Hey wrestling fans, it's time for Lights Out, where we'll be talking about everything coming soon to Impact Wrestling. But let's start off with the matches for Impact Wrestling on Pursiot Channel and Twitch for March 22nd. We know that Eli Drake and Eddie Edwards, they'll be taking on KM and Fallah Bahh. And we also know that the X Division Championship, it will be on the line when Rich Swann, the champion, defends it against Sami Callihan, and you know that there's beef between those two. Now, those are all the matches that are advertised right now for Impact Wrestling. I'm sure that more matches will be announced throughout the week. And the next thing coming to Impact Wrestling, we know that Impact Wrestling, they return to Windsor, Ontario, Canada at the St. Clair College for TV tapings on March 22nd and March 23rd. And that's for an event in partnership with Border City Wrestling. Recently signed Josh Alexander, he will be making his debut at this event. We also know that United We Stand will be happening on April 4th from Rahway, New Jersey, but also on April 4th is Impact Wrestling. They're teaming up with Vince Russo's House of Glory promotion for Culture Clash in Queens, New York. Now, previously, Impact advertised this to be streaming live on Twitch, so we'll see if they're still willing to do that. Now, the matches for United We Stand, we know that there's going to be an Extreme Dream match between RVD and Sabu. They'll be teaming up, some of the best from ECW. They'll be taking on the Lucha Bros, and we know that there's still some beef between the Lucha Bros and the Young Bucks, so we saw that even in Mexico and in AEW, and a lot of things that could be leading up to Double or Nothing, but you never know with an event called United We Stand. You never know if the Young Bucks are just going to show up at Impact Wrestling. I mean, that would be a surprise. and it would be huge, and it would capture some of the attention and some of the buzz from other wrestling promotions, and people will be talking about Impact Wrestling if that was the case, so I really hope that happens. We also have a monstrous ball match between Sami Callihan and Jimmy Havoc, and we know that both of these guys are out there. They're just nuts. Sami Callihan, I wouldn't want to get into debate with him about anything, and Jimmy Havoc, we all saw what happened when Impact Wrestling went to the UK and Jimmy Havoc had those wounds on his feet from the barbed wire. Then lemons were used, and that was acidic and even more painful than salt probably. So then we have Rich Swann from Impact Wrestling taking on Yamato from Dragon Gate. We also have Ultimate X returning, and that's going to be Jake Crist from Impact Wrestling, and he'll be taking on Dante Fox from Lucha Underground. And they'll also be taking on Pat Buck from WrestlePro, and Cotto Brazil will be joining that match from MLW, as well as Jack Evans from Lucha Libre AAA. And they'll also be facing a to-be-announced opponent. And then a match that was also announced for United We Stand is an intergender match between Tessa Blanchard and Joey Ryan. And I thought that Eli Drake was going to take on Tessa Blanchard first, but I guess plans changed and they decided to make Joey Ryan the challenger to Tessa Blanchard in that intergender match. Now, speaking of intergender wrestling, Santino Marella was on Beyond the Lights with Alicia Atu on Twitch, and he kind of took Disco Inferno's side because Marella explained that after seeing intergender wrestling, a woman might see another female combatant who might be victorious against a man, and she might think that she can do the same thing, but she might have a different opponent, and it could be a nutcase. I mean, he could be flat out crazy, and he might just throw one punch, and she could be out. Just knocked out like that, all because she got the idea that she could do it too because she watched intergender wrestling. Now, the former WWE IC champion, Santino Marella, he brought up how sometimes the media spins things out of proportion to get you to see what they want you to see, so it looks like the men are at war against women, and it couldn't be further from the truth. Marella brought up a brilliant point that nobody hates anybody, and in the end, we all just have to think for ourselves. Marella took it a step further, talking about transgender athletes joining MMA or wrestling, of whom might have been born male. They got surgery to look like a female, but it's unfair when they're competing against a biological female in combative sports because there has to be a barrier. And Marella says that the barrier is your biological attributes. And some people, they get sensitive about this, but at the same time, you have to be realistic as well. Whether you're initially born male or female, you're accepted as a human being, as a person, and you're loved. But it's not fair if you get surgery and now you're competing against the opposite sex. So a little bit of controversy right there from Santino Marella, but it's something that needs to be addressed. So on Friday, April 12th, Impact Wrestling will be part of a Twitch special called Salute to the Troops, live from Fort Campbell Army Post, and it's going to be a free event to all the members of the U.S. military. In another event, Rebellion, that takes place on April 28th as Impact Wrestling returns to the Rebel Entertainment Complex in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And then on April 29th, Impact Wrestling stays at the Rebel Entertainment Complex in Toronto for one night for a TV taping for the fallout of Rebellion. And then Impact Wrestling, they come to the ECW Arena, that's the 2300 Arena, for TV tapings on May 3rd and May 4th in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And that's everything I have to report on Lights Out. We hope you join us next week on Talk Wrestling Live on NorthCoastUnderground.com, where the Underground starts with you.
You've been listening to Talk Wrestling Live. Listen live on Mondays at 4 p.m. on NorthCoastUnderground.com.
And follow us on Twitter at TWL 24/7.
Goodbye and good night, bad. Rest in peace.